It's Sunday, March 12th, 2017, and this is the Product Mentor Talk. Today, we're joined by one of our mentors, Atma, behavioral scientist and product expert at Startup Ecology, to lead a talk on how do we build better teams. So let me just briefly explain the format for all of you today. People you see along the bottom of your screen are mentors and mentees in the Product Mentor Program. Product Mentor Program pairs up mentors and mentees all around the world, helping make better products, better product people, and better product decisions in due course. So I'll quickly go around the room to let everyone introduce themselves, then I'll say a few more words. So first, let me start with the person closest to me digitally. It's Nis.
Hey everyone, I'm Nis. I'm working on a company called Alpha. We are software for running product experiments.
Excellent. And Julian.
Hi, my name is Julian Dunn, and I'm a product manager at Chef, and I am a mentee for this session.
Excellent. And a quick intro from Atma.
Hi everybody, my name is Atma, and I will be your presenter today. I'm excited to get started.
Excellent. And I am Jeremy Horn, aka the Product Guy, and I'll be moderating here today. So for those of you joining us at theproductmentor.com/live, as you're joining us, on the top of the page is the video, on the bottom are the places where you can post your questions. If the questions are topically relevant, we will pass them to Atma in fairly real time and get your answers as close to that moment as possible. For the more generic questions, like why am I here? What am I doing? What's out there? Those more broad questions we'll save for the end of the talk, but we will still get to them as well. With all that said, let me hand it over to Atma to get it started about building better teams.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is a new approach to designing teams. An evolutionary, I need 3 minutes. Dude, I have a lot of people watching right now.
No, bro, this is your state. Like, you could go Kenny Witt, but you want to this is just state up.
Did Kenny go? All right, just give me 2 minutes and I'll go next.
That's not the point.
Dude.
I understand what you're saying, doing something, but that is terrible timing.
All right, everybody.
If it was me, you would have told me. That's the only reason I'm being mad at you right now.
All right, everybody. I'm sorry about that. We are right in the middle of wrapping up a state exam, and I'm going to have to step out for 2 minutes because I waited a whole year for this exam, and they're 4 hours late in conducting it. So we are going to continue with the presentation. Jeremy, I can hear you, right?
Yeah. If you're going to have to step out for a period of time, we might need to just reschedule this then.
If I step out, it's 2 minutes max.
All right. Like, people are probably not going to stick around, but.
All right, well, I'll see if I can get them excited enough to stay.
All right.
He went a little nuts on me over here. All right. So we're going to talk about a new approach to designing teams. And the way I want you to think about it is in terms of rules. And if you don't like the way a game is going, then you have some options, right? And we're going to talk about the new rules that I believe are what you can think about when you change the way the game is going. When I say the way the game is going, I'm talking about how your teams are functioning, how your organization is functioning, etc. If you don't like the way the game is going, you have some options because you can try to change the player's behavior in the game, and that's the standard process. People always say, talk to the individual, change the player's behavior, but you have another option. You can change the rules of the game. And when you change the rules of the game, you allow the players to accommodate to the new rules. And this is a really important part of what we're learning today because it's easier to change the rules than the person. More about I've written more about this on my site, askatma.com. But That's a really important point I want everybody to take away from this. It's easier to change the rules than it is to change the people. And that's because humans are designed to adapt very rapidly to new changes in rules. So, so when I say rules, what am I talking about? When I talk about rules, for our purposes, we're thinking social norms, mores, customs, and such. So what are the rules that govern teams, right? Well, this is the difficult part, right? Because sometimes rules are simple and obvious, but in the dynamics of organizations, rules are anything but simple, right? Organizational rules, unfortunately, evolve out of this super complex array of factors, which includes historical precedents, cultural expectations, media representations, and the psychology of the people who have started or founded the company. So there's the consequence is that all of this is almost impossible to decipher. And no one has really been able to figure this out, not even Google. And Google threw a lot of time and money at this problem. They did a really interesting study that spanned several years in which they did everything in their power to study what makes an effective team. And they tried to suss out the rules. And what they discovered is that no matter how researchers arranged the data, though it was almost impossible to find patterns or any evidence that a composition of a team even made a difference. So that was a really big deal because they had a lot of money and energy and resource to throw at it. Now, how do we proceed? How should we decipher this almost indecipherable morass, right? And that is what we're going to talk about today. Because in my opinion, what we're going to need is a evolutionary, multidisciplinary solution. So that brings us to part 2. And what we're going to do is I'm going to talk about 4 ideas. And they're ideas that come from both cognitive science, organizational psychology, and game theory and economics. The 4 are mechanism design, superrationality, knowledge sharing, and metacognition, and how we can use those to break the rules. So let's break those down first, okay? I don't know how many of you have heard of mechanism design. It's a subset of game theory. It was a mathematical approach to economic and policy questions. It was laid out in the 1960s by a Polish economist and mathematician and Nobel laureate named Leonid Hurwitz. And his instigating question that he was trying to solve was, how should a planner reach a decision when the quality of the decision relies on information spread among a number of people? And if you think about it, that's a really good problem to tackle. And it's a similar problem that we face in organizing teams and companies, right? How should a planner reach a decision when the quality of the decision relies on information spread among a number of people? In other words, if it doesn't make sense or it's not effective to have a centralized authoritarian system of management because you have all these other people who are going to impact the decision, how are you going to plan? So what he worked at was a mathematical formulation for this question, and that's what's at the heart of mechanism design. And I'm not going to do the math here because people generally don't care, but this is the mathematical formulation of the question that was at the heart of mechanism design. And if you ever want to have a private session with me and talk about this, it's somewhat interesting. But we can turn it into English, right? And in English, what that math formula says is that any solution should take into account the incentives of self-interested agents, right? So any solution should take into account the incentives of self-interested agents, right? So I always like to ask this question. I'm trying to understand what this means, because in other words, people on whose information the decision relies must find it in their interest to reveal the important information. And I'm using that word information, I'm stressing it because I'm going to talk about that. It's going to come up again when we talk about knowledge sharing. And what I want to do is create, hopefully, a new way for us all to think about how we bring people together. And instead of just letting it happen as it sort of flows, or as it, as sort of our environment lets us put teams together, we want to start to think about what are some physical, mechanical, behavioral constructs that we can use to change the decisions we make about putting our teams together. And one of them is this idea that comes from mechanism design. And the simplest way for me to sort of bring this home is to ask this really important scientific question. How does a hamster write a detective novel? And the answer is obviously, it starts with the ending and it works its way backwards. Since I can't tell who's laughing or not, I'll assume that went over well. It's an old joke because it's how mystery novels and detective novels get written, when they start at the end and work their way back. But that's a really important idea. And as a matter of fact, in economics, and we call mechanism design, is sometimes called reverse game theory, because we're reverse engineering the process based on the solution we're looking for. So when we think about a mechanism design problem, we think about three inputs, right? A collective decision problem, which is definitely an issue when you're putting together organizations and teams and building products. A criteria for assessing outcome, and we definitely have lots of that. And a description of the resources, knowledge, data, emotions, desires, etc. Now that seems like a simple sentence, but that's actually the key to the puzzle, because a description of the resources has to include more than the dry or cut and dry mundane resources that are available to you. You have to include the emotions and desires of the users, for example. And this is what takes us into a real challenge. How do we understand what are the emotions and desires of the users? What tools are we using to do that? Are we using ethnographic interviews? Are we using surveys? And that's something I can talk about a lot more another time. But this at least gives us a way to think about mechanism design, right? So I just want to give you a quick overview of these 4 ideas. We've talked about mechanism design. I'm going to tell you really quickly what I mean by superrationality. It's a term that I'm using in a somewhat updated manner. In economics and game theories, it's sometimes assumed that subjects can have what's called perfect rationality. That is, they can act in a way that maximizes their utility. Now, the controversy comes that in game theory, they have all these constraints on what's possible and not possible. But those don't apply in real life. In real life, we have so many opportunities to achieve what I call superrational behavior, because we can cooperate together, we can be mutualistic, we can generate better results through communication, etc. So even though some people argue against superrationality as a decision rule, in a model like the prisoner's dilemma, I'm going to argue that even if you select an increasingly complex game, it's still artificial, and that in the real world, human behavior is so complex and allows so many opportunities for what I mentioned a minute ago: communication, cooperation, introspection, and retrospectives, that we can learn and adapt in a far richer contrast than economic models would allow us to model. So my use of superrationality is novel in that it coincides more with a concept called Homo Reciprocans, or reciprocating human. And this is an economic theory of humans as cooperative actors who are motivated by improving their environment. Now, this concept stands in contrast to the idea of Homo economicus, which states the opposite theory, which is that human beings are exclusively motivated by self-interest. And I consider this to be false, because the very thing that separates humans from animal is their ability to choose benefaction over self-interest. My work is about demonstrating that if you change the rules underlying human interaction, you can cultivate a greater tendency towards superrational behavior. So just think of superrational behavior as not just doing what's good for you, but doing what's good for everybody so that everybody wins. It's kind of like a fancy way to talk about the win-win. And just to give you an example of a rule change, I know I talk in a lot of philosophical terms, so I want to give you a concrete example of a rule change that can create this. There's something that I call a reciprocal benefit incentive, right? So an RBI is when one person or a group's success is tied to the success of an individual or a group partner. Let me give you an example. Imagine you have a wellness competition at your workplace in order to promote employee health. However, instead of giving a reward directly to the individuals that make the most progress, you give the reward to the partner of the person that makes the most progress. So let's say in this case, you pair people up, and the partner of the person that makes the most progress actually gets the reward. And if you think that through, you'll see, oh, that's going to change a whole set of behaviors, because it's a rule change that creates super rational behavior. And so by tying the entities together via mutual accountability, you've caused a change in behavior. All right, so that's a reciprocal benefit incentive. The third topic I said I would mention, we talked about mechanism design, superrationality, and now knowledge sharing. And the summary I like to use for knowledge sharing is to think about prioritizing knowledge sharing over the knowledge itself. And knowledge sharing is a very poorly understood concept, but it is a central resource in gaining a competitive advantage among a team, among a startup, among any organization, because sharing of knowledge between people in collaboration has become this really powerful research focus in the area of strategic management. And depending on organizational design and collaborative structures, knowledge sharing strategies, rules, and efficacy just vary wildly whenever I look at different companies and teams and organizations. But the question is, how do you design the optimum system for knowledge sharing, right? And we know what the benefits would be, right? Sharing of a valuable organizational information, avoiding the reinvention of the wheel, reducing redundancy, reducing training times, increasing the retention of intellectual property after employees leave. And also, most importantly, changing the way that culture feels, because a knowledge sharing culture feels completely different than a cover my ass, take care of myself, do what's best for me culture. So there's this huge potential to improve the overall talent of the organizational members and improve more abstract capabilities such as innovation thinking and problem solving. Studies have shown that fusing talent management with knowledge management practices helps us to identify key knowledge workers. It improves knowledge creation as well as knowledge sharing and the development of knowledge competencies and knowledge retention. So you have this laundry list of benefits. You have this laundry list of benefits that come from that. Now, a simple way to conceptualize an enhanced knowledge management system is to simply focus on, like I said at the beginning, prioritizing knowledge sharing over the knowledge itself. And this doesn't mean that you discount the importance of acquiring knowledge in its various forms. It just means that you value the sharing of it more. One example of this that I talk about a lot is constant cross-training based on sharing how I solve, for example, sharing amongst yourselves how I share problems in my field. So these are weekly sessions in which people from different disciplines inside of your organization are constantly educating other members of the organization on how they think, right? And the benefit of that is it starts not only helping them become better design thinkers, but it really creates a stronger sense of understanding among people from other disciplines on how and why you approach a problem. If you actually take the time to insert this process into your organization, and it's a difficult thing to do because people feel like it's time consuming, it doesn't look like it has a direct benefit, but it actually will have a very huge impact, both short-term and long-term, once it becomes the norm. And the fourth category is metacognition. And metacognition, or what is known as thinking about thinking, or paying attention to paying attention, is what we call higher level cognition. And it was given this label by an American developmental psychologist back in the 70s. And it literally means cognition about cognition, or thinking about thinking. And the psychologist Falwell defined metacognition as knowledge about cognition and the control of cognition. But for me, another way to describe it is paying attention to paying attention, right? So metacognition is one of the highest predictors of relationship success. In a relationship, this would be the degree, for example, to which a partner pays attention to the interests of the other partner. So if you're in a loving relationship, male, female, 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 male, male, whatever it is, and you want to know how likely is it that we're going to succeed, one of the highest predictors of your success is the degree to which you pay attention to paying attention to the other person's interests. Are you aware of how aware you are of how you watch what they're doing? So metacognition in team or organizational development is the deliberate choice to shift from the paradigm of the ends justify the means to the paradigm of the means justifying the end. This is both metacognition and mechanism design combined because it requires the players to think about how they think, as well as a conscious effort to reverse engineer their rules. So think of it, if you do retrospectives, think of these as retrospectives for retrospectives, right? Now, if we think about how all these 4 pieces fit together, I've talked about 4 frameworks, and there's a summary and the science behind each of them, right? Mechanism design, we design from back to front, reverse engineer. That comes from game theory. Superrationality, we wire in mutualism and reciprocal benefits, also game theory. Knowledge sharing, we enshrine learning and cross-training. That comes from organizational science. And what I call metacognition, or I call the circle of permission, which is you create a place that gives people permission to ask the whys, multiple levels of why. And that comes from cognitive psychology. And when you put these together, you come up with an opportunity to change the way people think about the process of interacting as a team, as working as a team, et cetera, et cetera. Can you see me?
I see me.
No,
I enjoy what I see.
I don't know why you cannot see me. Oh, because I'm screen sharing. There we go. Now you see me.
Yes, we do.
So that was a breakdown. I know it's a lot of information, so I thought I'd just sort of pile through it and then get some input.
Great. No, it was a really great talk. Very, very speedy. A lot of information, I think, for people to digest. But I think with all that said, I definitely want to thank our speaker, Atma, behavioral scientist and product expert at Startup Ecology, for today's discussion on building better teams and a lot of the really interesting concepts that go into that. And also for those of you joining us, as always, the presentation will also be posted to our SlideShare channel. And a big thank you from me, Jeremy Horn, the product guy, and everyone else who joined us today and the product mentor. And don't forget, if you're interested in being a mentor, like today's speaker, like Atma, to product people of all sorts all around the world, please visit theproductmentor.com and sign up today. And also, if you're looking to fill a new product job with a great product person, visit our very own free-for-all job board at theproductjobs.com. And with all that said, everyone, thanks, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.